Here it comes. All right. Well, hello, everyone. Vanessa Mahoney with Startup Grind Grand Rapids here in Michigan. Welcome to our AI strategy session, intentionally implementing AI in your business. If you're new to Startup Grind, we are a community dedicated to fostering the growth of early stage companies by hosting events on topics of interest to the community, kind of like this one. So we're global and we have local chapters around the US and the world. Today we have Justin from Brightly, and I'll pass it over to him to tell us a little bit about himself and Brightly.
Yeah. Let me get my screen pulled up here.
Sure. In the meantime, if anyone has questions, just feel free to drop it in the chat. I'll be taking a look at that. And we'll have various points throughout the presentation where we can take some questions. You can also raise your hand. We can take them that way too.
Yeah, like Vanessa said, I know we're remote here, but very much this is a session for you guys. And I want to make sure that any questions are answered. I know we're going to get in some stuff like pretty quick. And I just want to make sure that we have some of a foundation before we move into some of the meat of the presentation. So I'll start here mainly with an introduction for all those that don't know me. I'm Justin Gauthier. I work for a company in Grand Rapids named Brightly. So I've been working here for nearly a decade, pretty close. And I've been doing software for a little bit longer than that, not too much longer, but my main primary focus was graphic design and UI, UX, and I more or less fell in love with development and have been chasing that ever since. So both sides of the brain, and I fit very well into trying to help people decode this complicated technology stuff. So a little bit about Brightly, just to jump into it. We're Grand Rapids. Oh, and before I jump into that, I'm up in Traverse City, so I'm not in the Grand Rapids office, but we are headquartered in Grand Rapids. 20 Fathoms is a place, I don't know if any of you have heard of it. Look it up if you haven't, but we sponsor it up in Traverse City. It's a startup incubator. And I think that's kind of more or less how I figured out about or heard about Startup Grind, through someone there, a connection there. So very cool. Nice to meet everyone here in this community down in Grand Rapids. And yeah, so a little bit more about Brightly. We're a research-driven, design-led studio. Mainly, the main thing I want to take away, we've been in business for over 10 years, and everything that we do is a experience. Everything from your experience as a customer to your customer's experience. That's more or less what this is saying. We excel at solving big, gnarly problems, and this is like a laundry list of things that we can do. And one thing that I really wanted to call out specifically that I'm excited about, we're working for an organization in Grand Rapids right now. They have reaches all over the country too, but doing a gig work like Uber for employment, short-term employment, which is pretty cool. And that's an iOS and Android app. So that's one cool thing that I'm working on right now. Just one of those items in this list. So that's a little bit about Brightly. I didn't want to go too much into that and get into the meat of the conversation. But if you need to reach out to me, to anyone there, just hit us up at brightly.com. So anyway, to get into this, so established AI versus emerging AI. I think this is a really good starting point, trying to lay the groundwork for what's to come. So you've probably been using AI technology for a long time. You probably realize it. Maybe that's why you're here watching this stuff, or maybe you never realized it at all. The AI technology more was considered, the term was machine learning technology, data-driven decision-making, stuff like that. So things like Netflix, Amazon, Google recommending top picks based on the stuff you've watched on Netflix, or suggesting shopping cart recommendations based on your purchase history, stuff like that. Maybe game AI. So people that you play games aren't real people. Chess AI. Essentially, chess can beat any human on the face of the earth right now, a machine at chess. They're so good. And just NPCs and stuff that riddle the world with conversations that come at you. So game AI, object facial recognition. I think all of us have seen this. Like, we use our phone, usually either thumbprint, but a lot of people use Face ID to log in, or Facebook auto tagging you, or Instagram, stuff like that, in your friends' pictures that they post without them taking a deliberate action. And being able to interpret scenery, like cows standing, feeding, resting, or objects on a desk, object recognition. One that we probably use all the time in our homes, voice assistants, stuff like that, helping us do things. This is called established AI, or what I'll as established AI. So the big point with established AI that I want to call out is that it's taking in data points, and making decisions within a confined box, essentially. So it's not creating new of anything. It's more just taking decisions, making decisions based on known data in a known constraints, essentially. So some other examples on here, like Google Maps navigation, voice to text, fraud detection on banking systems, stuff like that. That's all established AI. We've had this for decades. So now we go into the AI technology that's dominating headlines. I think one of the reasons why you guys are here. So this is stuff like natural language processing, like ChatGPT or OpenAI, Google, Gemini, and Anthropic Claude. Those are the big three that I called out that often push the bar and get all of us excited about all this new technology. Maybe a little scared about it. I don't know. Choose your adventure on that. But also things like advanced robotics, the Tesla bot. I know they launched or announced robo-taxis not too long ago. Boston Dynamics, and then the Figure One robot that actually, I wish I had the video in the slide, but the robot on the far right will do your dishes for you. I love that. Deepfake technology. So I don't know if you guys have seen any of this, and I want to play one video for you really quick before we jump into this. So I'm not obsessed with Tom Cruise. This is just to put a point, share a point. So let me share my, stop sharing my screen and share a tab really quick. Okay, so I'm gonna play this video.
You know, I do all my own stunts, obviously. I also do my own music. I've got a sweet spot.
This isn't Tom Cruise. This isn't
people
him.
are surprised that I'm a big Dave Matthews guy. Sings like an angel. You got your ball, you got your own chain. Right tight, do me tight, tight, elegant. Ooh. Of course, I don't sing as good as him, but I could probably beat him up in a fight.
Anyway,
That's wild.
Yeah, so I'll bring that back here. I'll share the presentation here. You can see it. Okay, good. So I call that out because it's crazy. That is a generated voice filter, visual filter happening real time as he's doing that recording or in post or whatever. But I put the real guy on this slide. Can you find him? We're doing like a little Where's Waldo here. You look over in the bottom right, here he is. So this is the guy. This is deep Tom Cruise, who he kind of looks like Tom Cruise. He maybe has the hair. So it's not like it can't recreate a person exactly, so one that exists, but I mean, I think it will one day, and maybe we're even already there, but this is a real person that essentially, like, how do you tell that this is a real person on the other end of a call nowadays? With deepfake technology, there's considerations of personhood credentials now. How do you verify that this person's actually real? So there's things in the world that we're having to think about that we didn't really have to think about before because of this emerging technology. Other things like generative art. So all this art on here is AI made. And one I want to call out in the bottom right here, this actually won a art competition, a human only art competition, entered in and won as faking to be a human. Lots of controversy around that. So this stuff, I call it emerging AI. So it's just an umbrella term to capture all this stuff in, like generative AI, deepfake, stuff like that. Autonomous vehicles, I think I mentioned robo-taxis, some of the crazy stuff on the horizon, quantum AI. That will blow your brain apart if you can really wrap your head around that. But it's just, things are not slowing down. So with all this, like, what exactly is this stuff under the hood? What is driving all these technologies to actually work and happen? So one thing I really want to point out is that this didn't happen overnight. And this, I really want to focus on these first two up here. One, because I'm biased, and two, because I think it gives a good window into some of the complicated bits without getting too complicated. But the main thing I wanted to point out is that starting at the top one, this isn't even where this technology starts. Obviously, someone had to create mathematics at some point, so it can go back forever. But like I said, I want to just start here because it's a really cool topic. So I get into the 1940, we go to 1945 with the medical theory of communication. This guy on the right, Claude E. Shannon, he was actually born in Gaylord, Michigan. And he grew up, maybe retired. His family's from Petoskey, essentially. He's known as the father of information theory. He coined the word bit, like bits, ones and zeros, stuff like that for a computer. Basically, he's the reason, or one of the reasons, obviously, there's lots of other people too, but he's a major reason how our technology is able to communicate with each other today. Like none of this, I can't talk to you without him, basically, which is insane. And it happened from Michigan, which is, I love it. I love being able to say that. Such an important thing for those of you in Michigan, and so close to home too. But anyway, then the next one that I want to get into is, I call it the first neural net, because this is the first neural net in a hardware implementation. It happened in 1957. It was called the perceptron. And a neural net is essentially, if you look on the graphic on the right, it's a digital brain that's composed of many neurons, little connections, right? So this idea was first introduced in 1943 between a neurophysicist and a mathematician. They theorized this with math, essentially, that they could connect these neurons together and make very complicated decisions. And then in the 50s, like I said, it was first implemented, and it was used in object detection in the 50s, which is crazy that we were able to do some object recognition in the 50s. Unreal. So how does this break down into all this AI stuff? So if we look at a neural net, a simple neuron in a neural net, we can think of it as a series of inputs that have a weighted importance. So how important is each one of these inputs in the overall decision? And then it has a decision or an output at the end. And in our example that I'm going to show, if the importance is above 50%, if the total importance on all these inputs is above 50%, then it's a positive yes result. And if it's below, then it's a no negative result. So if we take this neural net and answer the question, do I attend the organizational AI adoption session, or do I watch the recording, etc.? Well, we can look at the inputs on the right and see that learning is great. Social and networking, maybe after this, we can get together on social media, stuff like that. Maybe the travel distance is short. And today it's very short, or I'm the presenter. And if we look at those weights, it's 25%, 20%, 35%. And then on the one that I'm going to call out, I'm the presenter, it's 100%. So in this case, from my perspective, this neural net answering that question, if I'm the presenter, I'll be attending the session. So it's really just answer a question, take some inputs, have an importance in weights, and then get an answer. So if we take this and we blow that thing up into a crazy amount of decisions, this is ChatGPT 4.0. Roughly, we don't know exactly, but it's 1.7 trillion possible inputs or parameters within that decision tree that lead to another potential decision in the center that lead to numerous amounts of outputs. So they just string these neurons together and make these really complicated webs of decisions. And then the next stuff people are talking about, like it's going to get even bigger potentially. This is theorized, this is speculation, but I love to include it because it's interesting to think about. If this current gen is 1.7 trillion per model, the next ones they're potentially thinking are 5 trillion per model, which is what, like 5x or just under 5x. And then they're going to multiply each one of those by 3. So they'll have 3 of them. And each one of these little nets, neural nets, are essentially going to be trained on something specific. And they're all going to be used together in conjunction. It's called mixture of experts to come back with an optimal answer for your work that you want to do, your decisions, your queries, stuff like that. So I know that was a lot, and I don't know if anyone has any questions right now, but that's where I'd like to stop and maybe look at chat for a couple minutes and see if there's anything about emerging, established AI or how all this works. And if not, we'll move on.
Yeah, you can raise your hand or you can just drop some questions in the chat. I have a question, Justin.
Yes.
What is the difference between all of the training data that's going into these neural nets or into these LLMs?
Yeah. It's a good question. It kind of really depends on what your objective is with this stuff.
Mhm.
But for example, these LLMs, they are trained on a broad set of human language, essentially. So their training data is a ton of human language, human generated language. And how they did it is they took all of the words in human language and chunked it out into components, tokens that let them essentially like Lego bricks, put tokens together to create sentences. And then all they did was determine how likely is this Lego brick to be found next to another Lego brick, given this specific question that someone's asking or bit of text. And all it's doing is just trying to figure out the next Lego brick, one after the other. And that's all it's trying to do. So the training data for that is language. For example, like in more established AI, if we were, and I'll mention this in the future, but if your goal was to maybe sort apples, like red ones from green ones, we would train the data on this is what a red apple looks like by showing a ton of images and plotting them in a database or in a chart somewhere, and then show them a bunch of green apples, plot in the same. And then whenever the camera sees an apple, it should be able to determine red versus green, maybe kick the red ones out of the production line or ship them to this side versus the other. So it kind of depends on what you want to do, like what data you start with.
Okay, that makes sense.
Cool. It's a good question, and I'll move on, I guess. And Vanessa, if something comes up, definitely interrupt me, because I'm sure it takes a second to type out things too. So with that foundation, the organizational AI strategy portion. So before I get into this section, it's going to seem like AI, do this, do that. But I want to strongly preface that AI and these technologies isn't the answer for everything. So before you jump right in and say, we're going to try this out because something's going bad. For example, like if I want to use AI to summarize a ton of email that's coming in, maybe first I should answer the question, why is there a ton of email coming in? Maybe there's something wrong with your product, or maybe customers don't actually understand something and are having problems. And you're getting a ton of email because something's actually wrong. So let's not put a Band-Aid on it from AI, So, but on the other side of that, there is risk in resisting the AI adoption. So we saw in 2020, I think some others have saw it in 2020, that companies that weren't ready to be online digital, they kind of lagged behind. So, or were scrambling to catch up to be able to serve everybody who now can't go in person to see things,
Justin, we just had one comment from Brent. He
Okay.
mentioned, for example, in the apples example, it can also be used to compare skin moles against malignant cancer. So problems with using it is more around legal rather than technical.
Got it. Yeah, 100%. And maybe I should mention this too. It's funny because there's a lot of bias too in this training too. And for example, going back to the medical healthcare example, they were using it to train and try to catch early signs of tumors, but it actually was missing cases because it was trained on positive test cases, but every positive test case that it was trained on, the image had a ruler in it. So it was trained to know tumors only if there's a ruler found in the image. So it would just bypass actual tumors because it just didn't have a ruler. So it's very easy to like have the data. I mean, that's what I'm saying. It's very easy to not knowingly put bias into the training data, which is pretty interesting stuff. So, but yeah, there's a lot of we'll get into the legal risk of all that too. And I think that falls under regulatory risk, but we'll get into that. So some of the areas that we see an opportunity too, like you can split this up into internal operations or external customer facing operations. And then on the other axis, you have everyday AI versus game changing AI. So if we look at stuff on the internal side, we can think about it as like back office operations, maybe helping us look at financials into the future, generating reports. The other side of the fence, the game changing internal side of the fence, being able to actually employ these AIs to like do R&D. So some of the stuff like AlphaFold, where that's kind of R&D side and very intense work, but where they can generate protein structures on demand. So that's kind of in the R&D kind of side, the game-changing side of things. And then on the other side of the fence, external customer facing. So like managing maybe your customer experience. I know somebody that works on an AI tool that essentially helps customers with onboarding. And then on the other side, baking in the AI into your products actually brings some sort of revolutionary value specific to your technology. So a couple ways to break it out there. So moving on to here, I think a lot to think about in this world of how to start approaching these technologies. And I think breaking it down to these categories can help begin to get direction, on how you may approach these. So the biggest one I want to call out is vision. So having an idea and having a clear way to measure the success of that idea is obviously the foundation to all the other ones, the risk, value, and adoption. So that's why it's most important over here. So we'll get into the vision on how to think about these technologies. So really think about this as just a brainstorming session, like a blue sky session. There's no wrong answers. There probably are wrong answers, but at this point, there's no wrong answers. So, but list out all the goals that you have for your business, and then try to think about some use cases that maybe these types of technologies can help augment or offset and maybe make the humans at the company better at their job, more effective, and all that stuff. So you can look at one example here. Maybe the business goal is improved customer satisfaction. Maybe a use case for that is a advanced knowledge-based chatbot where it actually pulls into your company knowledge base and brings out relevant results. Maybe a metric to view this would be reduced time in call queues because people are able to find their information and they're not so much meandering around trying to find the answer. Maybe they're coming with more precision questions to your team, stuff like that. So I only listed out one here, but I would encourage you to screenshot this couple pages, see it in the recording, and just go through this. Just try to think as critically as you can about your business and your situation and list out as many of these as you can, because at the end of the day, you can just cross them off. You got to get an idea first, right? So in the interest of figuring out ideas, I did ask ChatGPT, what do you think some use cases or vision for implementing these systems would be? So I just wanted to see what it would say. So some of the ones that I agree with, natural language processing, obviously these systems are built to interpret language. So text summarization, conversational agents, being able to summarize large documents. Obviously you have to fact check. They are known to hallucinate, but it can help maybe point to things that, maybe don't spark your brain as weird right off the bat, So data augmentation, synthetic data generation, I call this out because they're already doing it. The next generation of models are being trained on data that is generated by the current gen models, which is nuts.
So Justin, just on that, Sean also had a question in the chat.
Yeah.
Given that LLMs determine the probability of a given word or token occurring in a sentence based on that word's occurrence or use in historical training data, how can LLMs, from your perspective, innovate as the probability of the occurrence of the new word adjacent to a word in your context would seemingly be lower in probability?
Right. And that's a great question. On the innovation side, I think that's where it takes more specific data than just the broad language. This is maybe stuff that's proprietary already to your company that you're feeding into. And I'm not necessarily saying it's an LLM. Like these when you're in that level, you're probably creating your own foundational model, which can be made specifically to detect anomalies, trends, patterns specifically in your data set and in your use case. But in terms of LLMs helping you innovate, I think the biggest thing, at least for me, the broad language tools that you can just go pay $20 for right now to do is, yes, they're limited in what they return. But I think a large part of like what blocks me up sometimes is just forgetting. Like I get too much tunnel vision down a path, and it just breaks me out of that. I get to ask it a question, and maybe it tunes it in a way that my specific brain wasn't necessarily thinking about. And that maybe unlocks a thought to help me go faster in a different way, or even unlock some thought that helps you break a hurdle in you actually innovating as a human, right? So I think there's two ends of that. So hopefully that answers your question. But yeah. Anything else there floating out there, Vanessa?
Nope, that's all I got. So
Perfect.
It sounds like as far as innovation, there's really still a lot of that human aspect to it.
Yeah. And even like when it comes down to, you may use the tool to do the innovation. Like for example, like the protein folding, the AlphaFold, that's extremely very specific use case used for a very specific task. And it's incredibly, I mean, they won the Nobel Peace Prize for it. Two guys did. So very innovative, right? But that is a model trained on very specific, protein data in the human body and in existence, et cetera. So like those people on the team were creating those models from data that they probably had, proprietary stuff like that, and were able to tune it specifically for their needs for a very specific use case. So I think that's like, I don't know, it's hard to say, but yeah, it's very new. I would say there's only a few people, and I think it's like really the main companies that are building these models, and anyone that's going to employ it specifically in a use case like the protein folding, I think are the big ones that are hitting the innovation R&D next gen AI, stuff, or next level. So, but yeah, so back to some of the things that I think could actually function, and it's the NLP, the data augmentation, because they're doing it, which is insane. They've already trained O1 Preview, which is ChatGPT's next model, on data generated by another large language model, which is crazy. And then code generation. I put this one on here because I use it. I know that it can do it. I use ChatGPT and these AI tools like Copilot pretty much every day. And more just to get past, like I said, saying to Sean, like to break my tunnel vision. It's not necessarily writing every line of code for me in the software I write. It's more just jump starting my brain into like, hey, does this make sense? Like, am I thinking crazy? So I think in programming, it's called rubber ducking. So I have like a rubber duck on my desk, but it's just ChatGPT, and you talk to it, and then it helps you solve your problems. But anyway, but then I moved on. So for example, like this prompt, the AI prompt was salmon in the river. So majestic, salmon, our little salmon friends swimming down the river. So you got to be careful what you ask for it on things like design and art generation. So context is everything. And a human with the prompt, draw me something salmon in the river, I think we could probably infer that it's not salmon from the grocery store. So or from the fishmonger. So, and then image generation, stuff like that. So most of the time nowadays, a lot of the human problems with generating 6 fingers or multiple arms are gone, but it still is limited in what it can do in terms of quality and image size and resolution. Same with video. It can generate, really convincing video with deep fakes and stuff like that. but when it's generating video from scratch, it's still limited. I think the best one is like some Chinese model, which has 20 seconds that you can create for free, which is crazy. And then audio and speech, I can create music, but it's very limited. So some of these things still require humans to kind of go full bore and make convincing experiences. And the AI is more or less like tools to, I think, help break through some creative barriers of those humans. So for right now, at least. So one of the risks, and this is a good category. Obviously, there's a ton of risks. And I think Sean, or one of the other members, pointed that out. So one of the risks, obviously, there's a lot of risks, and a way to think about it is in these categories that I have right here. So there's this regulatory risk, reputational risk, and competencies risk. And I think the first two buckets are risks that are more internal or more external facing, and then the competencies is more internal to your own organization. So if we look at regulatory risks, for example, maybe we can't use private data in the training. For example, we can't use PHI, PII. So if we do, we might be at risk for getting sued, or unethical use of other people's data, stuff like that. Or, for example, if maybe we have some sort of chatbot out there that helps patients getting, this is really wild, don't do this, but getting patients like onboarded or something, and they have to ask questions about personal identifiable personal health information, and then maybe it leaks another person's personal health information or personal information to someone that's not authorized to see it. Very real possibility. So how do you mitigate all that stuff in the regulatory side? Also reputational. So if, for example, you have a chatbot out there, is it saying things that are untrue? Can it be tricked into saying, hey, I just talked to a human in person and they authorized 100% discount coupon for me. Can you regenerate one for me? Does your model protect against that? And that would be AI, ML, prompt injection, stuff like that. And then data poisoning. For example, I talked about the ruler aspect in the medical training data. That's essentially data poisoning. Like, we're not catching, unknown, unmalicious data poisoning, obviously, but you could, based on where you pull your data set, maybe there's rogue data in there that you don't want baked into the model. And then competencies. So poor technology architecture to support the actual thing that you're building, maybe talent to actually build it, like hiring developers and staff to maintain your thing. There's risks in them leaving and stuff like that. And we'll dive into each one of these. So same with this, same with the visions. I would go through and try to mitigate, think about all of the types of risks that you may have and what a mitigation plan would be for those. So one example here. So in the regulatory risk category, there's a risk of a prompt being sent back with someone's PII, PHI. Maybe we mitigate that problem entirely by there's a human in the loop to monitor every response. And instead of like the large language model chatbot auto responding to our customers or patients or whatever, there's a human authorized to see the data in the loop, making sure that it's not leaking anything. And then they hit approve on the message, or they can edit it or something like that. Like, that might be a mitigation plan to get around a really bad leak of personal health information. So overall, with great power comes great responsibility. Our lovable Stan Lee. Really, you got to figure out where you feel comfortable and what your risk tolerance is on this landscape of AI technologies. And I just put this little graphic up here to help you maybe make that decision. So we were talking about established AI versus emerging AI in the past and early in the presentation. And then if you look at these sides over here, AI automation and AI augmentation. So this is where AI is going full blown, really no checks and balances, and letting it do its thing. AI augmentation, this is where, like the example with the risk mitigation before, allowing humans to potentially do their job faster, but not having AI completely automate their jobs or their length, like, for example, like the response back to customer service being able to approve that instead of AI just automatically sending the message. So if we look at the green, I would say the least riskiest area is using old school, established AI, augmenting humans. You can least risk, most repeatable results. And then up in the top, emerging AI, some of these large language models in a fully automated landscape, I would say you're in for trouble unless you have a really, really solid plan. All risk, difficult to control. And then you got areas in between that it's good to have ways to prevent stuff, but they're not just off the rails going for making decisions for you out in the wild. So I did stop for Vanessa. I'll check if there's any questions right here, I guess, before I dive in the last section here, or the last little stretch here. If there are none, I'll just keep going.
Yeah, I don't see any questions on my end, but I did have a question. When you were doing this live as part of the live presentation at 20 Phantoms, what were some of the questions that were coming up from the crowd at that point?
A big question, and maybe I say this, one of the questions here, what's the difference between AI automation and AI augmentation? And I think I did a really bad job in the last one describing it, so I hope I did it better here. But basically, yeah, I think it's important because there's a lot of shiny in AI automation, and that's where the AI just goes off and does its own thing, right? But then the other side of the fence, it's not so shiny, I guess you'd say. It's more like, well, what's the point then? But the point is, like, there's a lot that humans do. For example, I'll give an example from my job. Like, I write code day to day. So I can write a function for something in, let's say, 20 minutes. That's me looking something up on the internet and writing it down and coming up with it, testing it, make sure it works, right? But I can go ask the ChatGPT, because it's something very specific. Hey, can you write me this? It'll be done in 30 seconds versus 20 minutes. And then I can just go forward and test it. And maybe it takes like 1 minute. So I'm all in for 1.5 minutes versus 20 minutes. That's AI augmentation. It's making me go crazy fast nowadays. So, and I don't think people should shy away from AI augmentation, because I think you can only learn from that. Like, being able to get past those mental roadblocks in your brain. Oh, here's another example. My father-in-law, he runs a eye doctor service or practice, and he prescribed something to one of his patients because it looked exactly like the thing right on. It's like eye drops or something. The patient comes back a couple days, it's not getting fixed, right? He goes back in, looks at the medical history. Whoa, why didn't I notice that? Take these eye drops instead. And next day it was better. But it's like he had so much tunnel vision in that one moment where one of these systems being able to review the patient history would have caught it right away. It would have changed his thinking just a little bit. It probably wouldn't have like diagnosed the person, but it would have changed the person, his thinking as the professional enough to get out of his tunnel vision, essentially. So that's AI augmentation too.
Yeah, and I think I see it a lot too for me on the marketing side, where there's enough discussion around content generation.
Yeah.
Right. And what's coming from the ChatGPTs of the world. And I think it's helpful for content generation. So you're not starting from scratch, right? Rather than staring at a blank screen, you're starting from some basic form of content. But the reality of it is, very rarely is it ready to go based on the answer that you get. Yeah. Right? Very rarely. It helps you get started, but it definitely isn't automated. Or it could be if you want it to be, but you're not going to sound anywhere near like a real human.
Yeah. I don't know. You guys, I don't know if you're acutely aware, but it's like this concept, the dark forest internet or something, I think is the term. But basically, it's all content on the internet that you would see and be fed is completely generated by AI bots and stuff. So it's just it's a bleak look at the internet, but hopefully we don't get there. Hopefully humans can win out on all this stuff.
Agreed.
I think we'll win. You know, and I don't even think it's a competition. I think it's, like I said, my outlook and all that is it's a tool to augment us. And if done correctly, it actually is insane. Like my productivity at work has gone like nuts, you know, with it. So I'm not really, I don't have imposter syndrome so much on new things because I can gut check my understanding with something very broad, which is very cool to do. I really enjoy that. So
that's a good use of it, you know, to kind of prevent that imposter syndrome. And hey, I have this idea, I have this that I've been thinking about, and let me test it quickly rather than maybe taking a much longer time to test that or to validate it.
Yeah, exactly. And like OpenAI has these GPTs. So like Sam Altman, for example, he made a GPT full of all his like startup advice that he gave to startups. So then you go into this little Sam Altman bot and you can get advice from him, you know? So
oh, interesting.
It's kind of cool.
That.
Yeah. But yeah. Okay, cool. Well, the value section. So the value section, like there's a lot of ways to harness these technologies and create value for your individual business. And I know there's a lot of ways to do that. I want to touch on a few in this section. One of them being data-driven decision-making. And that's more along the lines of identifying patterns and stuff like that. I think I mentioned that with the Apple example. Maybe even take that to like rotten apples. It's designed to kick them out of the production line as it passes through a camera. That's data-driven decision-making. You can extrapolate that onto other areas of your business. Personalized and customer experience. So taking in data real time from like customer shopping cart, stuff like that. One example I wanted to give here, kind of maybe on the extreme end of personalization, is, for example, Meta, Mark Zuckerberg. He wants to, his ultimate end game of AI is everyone has a specific model, foundational model tuned for them based on their personality, who they are, what makes them them, and have those models act on behalf of you in the metaverse and other things. So that's like the ultimate personalized AI right there. So that's the extreme example. And then also like new product development. I think we talked about this with like AlphaFold, protein folding, and also just like you can use this more on a other level, maybe using it in a way to document, you know, journey maps, stuff like that, or document, like you have a recording session and you can use it to take notes with and stuff like that. So there's other ways that can help you in developing new products, but not necessarily is the new product that you're developing. So and then the last section here into adoption. So all of this with hopefully everything of the plan is what you've thought it out, you've mitigated risks, you've found a way to track value to make sure that it's actually working. Now this is the make it or break it. So this is where proof of concept to production can go wrong. So there's top of mind adoption factors, in my opinion. So it's how competent the level of organizational maturity. So how ready is your organization or your business ready to take on these tools? There's a gradient also of build versus buy, and it's not so black and white. It's usually a mixture of both. And then also common adoption blockers. So if we dive into the first section of this, the organizational AI maturity, we can look at how competent and ready our organization is through a couple lenses. So organizational competence, how we plan to govern or governance of these AI technologies, the data, the tools, all that stuff, and then the infrastructure that backs it up. So organizational competence is essentially stuff like, are we able to acquire and keep the talent in-house, or do we have to go out and find another strategic partnership with another company or another organization to offset that skill development internally? And then also a big thing to say is this needs buy-in at the leadership and C-suite level, because if this is an organization coming in trying to adopt this technology, there's likely going to need to be a lot of brains in the initial situation to think of things like how to mitigate the risks, and also potentially change some company policies at the foundation core to help use these systems or promote it. So if you don't have people at the top aligned and they're not on board, I don't think you're going to it's a big blocker for production, shipping it to production. So AI governance. So this is just how you handle the data, the ethical guidelines, the transparency, communication through all that, how you use it. So like data governance and security, making sure that only the people that need to see the data are allowed to see the data to prevent stuff like data poisoning and stuff like that. Also navigating evolving regulations. So if tomorrow Congress passes a bill that essentially wipes your business off the face of the planet, how do you handle that? Or how do you handle that from not happening? So we don't lose our business because of something that we can't control. And then also ethical AI development. So how do we be transparent with the stakeholders, how we're using the AI, how the organization is benefiting from the AI, but also on the other fence, to not use customer data without them knowing or their permission. LinkedIn, for example, did this not too long ago. I think it's training off of all your data on LinkedIn, but they gave you a toggle to turn it off if you want on your profile. Stuff like that. So they gave them controls to do that. And then also like part of the governance too is to make sure that the business is actually our organization is actually benefiting from these tools. They are expensive at the end of the day, and we don't want to just use them for nothing. We want to make sure we're realizing benefit from that. And then the infrastructure. So like I said, third-party costs, they can get crazy if you're going to go off and build your own tool. Dedicated hardware, monitoring optimization. So if you build these tools, usually they get more popular. So are you able to support the demand for it as it grows in popularity? Or be able to dial back the demand when it's not in need. That way you're not just paying a ton of money for hosting costs. And then that goes into the scale, security, and reliability, all that stuff. So being able to handle all of the possible attacks. Like the guy that runs the AI company that I know, their prompt manager or interface gets tested every single day from bots and from other people to make sure that they're not leaking any type of information, which is interesting. So, and that's also for good and also malicious, so they got to protect against all that. And then I know we're running out of time, but I'm going to try to get through the last of this. So build versus buy. So this is the spectrum of, do we license something like ChatGPT, or do we go out and build something of our own? And really the pros and cons between that is, on the buy side, we can deploy it fast. It's usually cheaper up front. And then the cons, like at the end of the day, it's a tech company that owns your data, or you have to make sure that you agree to the licensing and the terms and conditions of their data policies and stuff like that. So you have to deal with that. And on the build side, it's more specific you can make it more specific. Like the LLM is very broad, very big, very bloated, maybe for your use case. So you can make something more specific, more tuned. It's cheaper to host, stuff like that. But over time, the first round of that might cost a significant investment because you guys are building it from the ground up on the build spectrum. So if we kind of break that out, on the far left, we have consume. So where the blue stuff, someone else is managing the blue stuff. So this is like you buy ChatGPT or you buy Llama Index to do things for you. And then a middle ground is extend. So you don't have to go full bore building. You can still have the complex stuff like a foundational model and the fine tuning managed by someone else. But maybe you can go in and hydrate a context with your own data. So this is something along the lines of maybe a very specifically trained chatbot for your company. And then on the most extreme build, you're basically OpenAI. You're building the models from scratch. You're fine-tuning them and everything else. So in that side, in this spectrum, essentially all that you have to be aware of is, as you climb the build spectrum, the need for the organization's AI maturity needs to increase, and also the risk increases and the benefit obviously at the other end increases, because you're essentially building IP for your business. And then
Justin,
the last,
sorry to interrupt. I have a question here, and this is more of a marketing question. So for example, we have CRM tools like HubSpot, right? And they tend to score people as leads or marketing qualified lead. And you're using their AI, but they're using your data to train it. So would that sit somewhere in the extend?
That's probably here. I would consider that here.
Okay.
Still. And that's only because in extend, you're managing the application. So you would essentially be HubSpot. This HubSpot is extending. So HubSpot right here is likely doing this, extending.
Got it.
They built the CRM tool, the application for you to use, and they're managing retrieving your data from their system into the prompt as needed to like find qualified leads and all that type of stuff. So they're probably they are probably on the extend side, and you are consuming them.
Ah, interesting. Thank you. That clears it up.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. Great question. So with that, some common adoption blockers. So really waiting too long to try a proof of concept. Like it's just a proof of concept. So it's not being launched. It's not customer facing. Maybe it's customer facing with a few select friendly customers, stuff like that, you know, but don't wait to try something just to try something. The other thing is data debt. So getting ahead of your organization's data, making sure it's in a structured place, and mainly based on the vision and some of the goals you may want to ask, even is any of that data in like a database somewhere that those questions could be answered? Is it something that a human intuition just knows? Then it likely can't be solved with AI. The data must get in some sort of semantic structure for that thing to make decisions on. So that's data debt. Trying to tackle the organization's data set all at once, likely you can find a very small sliver of a problem that you can go at just that specific piece instead of trying to be like, well, our whole organization needs to be AI by 2025. Like, you know, let's maybe say like, is customer lead qualification is our first proof of concept. You know, maybe that's pretty slim slice. Maybe that might be too broad. Who knows? And then also poor self-evaluation of your organization's current competencies. So maybe you're overcommitting to something just because you're unaware. You don't know what you're doing yet. And that's okay, because the point of building these types of things and building proof of concepts is finding your boundary, building muscle into building these types of tools and shipping these types of projects. So the more you do it, even if you don't launch it, you're going to get better each time at doing it. And that leads us to the last one. So proof of concept to production. If we don't really clearly think about the stuff that happened before in this presentation, we have a plan for everything, specifically like infrastructure and all that stuff, then going to production is likely just not going to happen. It's a very big leap, unlike current software. Like shipping from staging to production in regular software is hard enough, but this stuff is just on another level. And stats here, so not to dissuade you, but 80% of proof of concepts do not ship to production. And these are the reasons why. 41% lack of developers, 38% excessive costs, 36% inadequate infrastructure, 35% poor coordination between IT teams. So that's just 35% literally just because of bad communication. Like, come on, we can solve that. We're humans, right? And then also 35% tech services partners, strategic development, they didn't meet the project spec. This is a study done by the IDC, the International Data Corporation. Just want to pull this in there. So with that, I challenge you. I know this year is short, but maybe try to find a proof of concept, a little tiny slice before the end of the year. Try to adopt this type of technology into your business. And I know you guys come from UX or design. You guys have probably seen this. If our end result is building a car, let's not build a wheel. How is that useful to anybody? So if our end result is building a car, let's build a skateboard first. And that's if your problem is too big, make it smaller, make it smaller, make it smaller, make it smaller. Trying to find something the most granular level that you can ship and get out in the world and test. And I think as you do that, you'll build muscle and get better at these types of next gen tools. But yeah. That's it. Thank you everybody for coming and participating. And if there's any questions here too, like I'm sure we'll get at it. So
yeah, I don't have any questions on my end that I'm seeing, but if I do have Sean saying thanks, this is a great presentation. So kudos to you, Justin. Yeah, but if everyone, as they're digesting the information, they wanted to reach out to you after the fact, how do they find you?
Yeah, I would just go Sorry for my contact, but here's my contact information. So you can just email
Perfect.
me at Justin, or I think we have a contact form on brightly.com, so you can do that too. But
Cool.
if you want to
Email.
reach out, or LinkedIn, I watch LinkedIn. So I've been responding to people. If you have more questions, definitely we'll dig in nitty-gritty with you one-on-one if needed. So
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Justin. This was very helpful.
yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. We'll
Lots
talk
to
to you all
think about.
soon.
Yes. And I will, once I have the recording ready, I'll be sure to share it to everyone
Awesome.
here. Wonderful. Well, thank you, everyone.